Greetings, my dear fellow learners. I'd like to start my talk by acknowledging the great work that Ramanujan College is doing. They are actually changing the landscape of online training of teachers in India by organizing such wonderful programs. I would also like to thank Dr. Anshika Lum for offering me this opportunity to share my knowledge with you all. I am Smriti Sharma Bhatia. I teach chemistry at Miranda House, University of Delhi. And today I would be speaking about nanotechnology. So, the title of my talk is Nanotechnology, the Promise and the Challenge. Well, my dear friends, if you think about it, isn't like it is so amazing that we can talk without being physically in contact? I can record my lectures at my own convenience, and you can, listen to them at your convenience, and still pedagogically you are gaining. So technology is really changing our lives in an exponential manner, and there are many technologies that are doing that. One of them is nanotechnology. It has exponentially disrupting our lives, but for the better, I would say. So I have divided this talk roughly into three parts. I would be introducing nanotechnology, then the applications of nanotechnology, and then I would also discuss some pointers, as in how to inculcate nanotechnology technology in your pedagogy. If you want to teach students, so how to start, and what are the various factors that can help you if you take care of them. So let us start the talk. Nano is a prefix that means very, very small, and the word nano is from the Greek word nanos, meaning dwarf. It is a prefix used to describe 1 billionth of something. So you can imagine 1 billionth of something. In case you want to have, let us see what a nanometer is. So by this definition, a nanometer would be 10 raised to the power minus 9 meters long. So when I say this, it is not we don't understand how small it is. So just to give you an idea, uh, DNA, the width of DNA is 2 nanometers. Proteins are in the range of 5 to 50 nanometers. Viruses are in the range of 75 to 100 nanometers, and bacteria's 1000 to 10,000 nanometers. But for me, the favorite picture is this one. See, this log of wood that you can see on the screen is one human hair under electron microscope. And these threads that you see, they are nanofibers. So now if you compare, you really have, a perceptional idea that how small is nano. Compared to our such a thin hair, nanofibers are so small. So basically, many definitions of nanotechnology exist, but I would say two things have to be very important. It has to be whatever is happening, the manipulation of atoms, the controlling of atoms, creating structures or creating new properties, novel properties, uh, all those things have to be at in the nanoscale, and that would be 1 to 100 nanometer. That scale is very important. uh, that is what we have to actually see. And of course, like any other science and technology, nanoscience is the study of the fundamental principles, and nanotechnology is the application of nanostructures into useful devices. So that ways, but you may ask, why so much buzz now? What is it? Because in due course of time, in my talk also, I let you know that nanotechnology was always there. Maybe we did not quantify it as nanoscience, but the application part was already there. So why so much buzz now? The reason is like there are four reasons, in my opinion. First of all, atomic scale characterization is now possible. Now it is possible. Now we have got tools, right, to characterize the matter at the atomic scale. Secondly, we have tools available to that can help us in manipulating single atoms or single molecules. Third reason that is very important is the proportionate increase in the computational power. When I was a student in my school, what my PC used to do, I can do all that and much more in my mobile now. So there has been an exponential growth in the computational power. So because of that, because computational power, there has been such increase in computational hardware as well as software. That is why we can study nanosystems at very large scales, very large time scales, like for a lot of for very large time scales and very containing large number of atoms. So that is possible because of the computational power. The fourth factor that is that contributes somewhat is the fact that now is the time for interdisciplinarity. Now you can't say that I'm a physicist, I'm a biologist, I'm a chemist. Everything is coming together. There is fusion of various disciplines, and that suits this technology very much because by character, nanotechnology is everywhere. It is like it is an amalgamation of various branches of science coming together. So that is why these are the four factors because of which there is so much buzz about nanotechnology these days. What is so special about this nanoscale, you may ask? I mean, this is a refresher course in physics, so I'm pretty sure that the physicist and otherwise also we know that at nanoscale, obviously the size would be small, so gravitational force will become negligible and electromagnetic forces would dominate. Secondly, behavior of the system would be governed by quantum laws and not the macroscopic, like the classical mechanics laws, right? And the third very important factor is there is greater surface to volume ratio of materials at nanoscale. That is very important. Because of that, various properties they change. For example, catalytic efficiency increases a lot. So we will study these properties like catalytic, electrical, magnetic, mechanical, optical, spherical, biological. All these properties change, and most of them change for the better. And since we have the ability now to manipulate like characterize at the atomic scale and manipulate atoms and molecules, we can actually, this thing is going side by side with that. So, for example, I'll give you an example. I told you that surface to volume ratio increases, that helps in increasing the catalytic efficiency, in increasing the efficiency of a catalyst, because more the surface, so catalyst can react in a better way. And other thing, I think this is the most common example that is given for nanotechnology. Optical properties. What is the color of gold? Yellow. But at nanoscale, the color changes. It is no longer yellow. At 700 nanometer, for example, it will be red. At 600 nanometer, the color would be orange. So likewise, the color changes at various nanolengths. So that that was just an example of optical properties. Similarly, all the other properties also behave differently. Uh, Nanotechnology, when we are designing new materials, novel materials using nanotechnology, then we can have top down or bottoms up approach. Top down approach is the way a sculptor would carve a statue by removing the blocks of marble that he or she doesn't need. Similarly, you will etch a block of material to the desired shape. For example, you're making a chip or a processor, right? But in bottom up, you are uh, like putting atom. One, I don't have that image right now. Like you are putting the atoms and then making it. For example, Lego. You play Lego, like small Lego blocks, and then you make a big thing out of it. That is bottom up approach. And I was saying that I don't have an image of that. First of all, IBM scientists had written IBM using xenon atoms, 35 xenon atoms. So they wrote, like they made that structure, IBM, using those atoms. So that is bottom up approach. Now we come to the classification of nanomaterials. There are many ways in which nanomaterials can be classified. First is like they can be bulk, right? Bulk can be one phase or multiphasic. Then nanoparticles. Nanoparticles can be, suspended on the surface of the solid, or they can be, just a second. they can be suspended in liquids, they can be suspended in solids, and they can be airborne, right? These are the nanoparticles. Otherwise, they can be surface bound also, the nanomaterials. So surface bound would be structured surface, a film, or a structured film. This is one classification. And since I am only giving you a primer on nanomaterials, I'm not going into the real details of all these. There are many sub classifications of all these. But this is just an introduction. And if it interests you, then you can read on this. There are excellent texts available, excellent resources on the internet available for the detailed reading. But since it is a primer, this lecture, so let us stick to that. Then another classification is when you classify the nanomaterials based on whether they contain organic molecules, inorganic, or are hybrids. So organic molecules would be carbon based and otherwise. For example, fullerenes, nanotubes. Carbon nanotubes can be single wall carbon nanotubes or multi wall carbon nanotubes. And nanofibers, electrospun nanofibers like cellulose, biocellulose, which come under nano range. Then inorganic can be metals like silver, gold, copper, zinc, all these metals. Then metal oxides, copper oxides, nanoparticles, iron oxide nanoparticles. Titanium oxide is very popular in the sunscreens. And then we have quantum dots, which are known as metalloid nanoparticles and come under inorganic nanoparticles. For example, cadmium selenide, zinc sulfide. And then we have hybrid nanomaterials, which combine either one organic nanomaterial with other. That would be organic organic, organic inorganic, and inorganic inorganic. So that is one classification. So right now we are done with two classifications, right? So the third classification is the third classification is based on nanomaterial, the dimensionality. So 0 dimension, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, or 3 dimension. 0 dimension, this is very important to understand, but most of the people confuse here. 0 dimension would mean there is no dimension that is in the macro scale. 0 dimension means all the dimensions are in the nano scale. That is very important to understand. Second, for example, quantum dots, all its dimensions, it's a dot, all its dimensions are in the nano range. Sorry, are in the nano range. This is 0 dimension. None of it, 0 dimensions are in the macro range. Okay, one dimensional are one dimension is in the macro range, rest are in the nano range. For example, nanotubes, because then 1 dimension would be in the macro range. It will be long. So things like nanotubes, wires, rods, all these come under one-dimensional nanoparticles or nanomaterials. Sorry, two dimensional would be 2 dimensions are in the macro range, and 1 dimension is in the nano range. So there'll be sheet like structures like thin films, plates, layered structures. These structures would come under 2 dimensional. Then we have 3 dimensional. Now you would say that 3 dimensional money, all the 3 dimensions are in the macro range. Then how come it is a nanostructure? That's because it is a assembly or a combination of various nano materials. They can be 0 dimensional, 1 dimensional, 2 dimensional, or a mix of all that. So that is your 3D nanostructure. So that ways. Next, very important concept or that you need to know. I mean, that will help you understanding about various terms that you encounter is generations of nanotechnology or generations of nanostructures. So 4 generations are there. We are, you know, almost halfway in this generational arc. Like there are 4 generations, so we've reached up to the second generation. So what is first generation? Passive nanostructures. Passive nanostructures is a generation that is like mostly used. The nanostructure itself is not active, is not doing anything, but it has got stupendous properties, right? So it is the creation of the materials that uh, that have properties that are revolutionary. The material itself is not doing anything, but when its properties are excellent. So that is the most work has been done till now in this stage. Next is active nanostructures. Active nanostructures would be, they will go to a particular site and then they will act, right? For example, one example would be this nanomedicines. The nanostructures aren't passive ones with having excellent properties. They make changes to other things. They are active in some way. For example, a team of researchers has had incredible results using targeted nanostructures in mice for metastatic cancer. The mice had incurable breast cancer, and it was like metastatic means it was spread all over the body, and 50% were effectively cured of the disease within 8 months of treatment. So that would be 24-year survival period in a human being compared to a mice. Okay. How it works, that nanostructure, porous silicon nanostructure that they used, that is infused with an anti-cancer drug, it travels to the tumor site and then there breaks into nanoparticles that then kill the, and targeted delivery this is called, then kill the cancer cells. So that will be known as active nanostructures, targeted drugs, bio devices, 3D transistors. For example, the MEMS systems on our smartphones, due to which, if I rotate my smartphone, the screen also rotates. So the gyroscopes, microscopic accelerometers, all these also come under active nanostructures, right? So we are right now, most work is being done in this second stage, first and second stage. So as I told you, in this generational arc, we are on the second. We are halfway through. Third is the dream of the nano scientist, and one or two scientists. So many scientists are working on this, but it has been achieved by some. But it is at the research stage right now. This is when nanoparticles or nanomaterials or nanofactories, they assemble themselves into other things, and those things, they are they're complex large scale machines and materials. So it is the nanotech that most people think of in layman's mind. This is the fiction, that picture created by various books and all. For example, if you've read Michael Crichton's Prey, so that also talks of nano robots only in the form of and those nanobots. So these things have been created in the mind of a layman by the fiction creators. So this is what that would be like: nano particles or nano factories assembling together in a, not in a random way, in a designed way, well designed way. So that ways. And fourth stage is would be the perfection of this. At this level, we have complete control of the actual molecules that make up our nanomachines. In other words, while a third generation nanomachine may have different components made from specific molecules, excuse me. So here each molecule will have a specific structure and function. So let us see when we will achieve this fourth generation of nanotechnology, or third also, because third also we are right now only working. So this was about some terms and some classifications that you needed to know. Now we will study about the development of nanotechnology. So I was saying that now we will study about the history of nanotechnology, and I have already discussed, I've already mentioned this, that nanotechnology is not something that is a new phenomena. It was always there. So early examples of nanostructured materials were based on craftsmen's empirical understanding, and manipulation of materials. They did not know what was what was the science behind it, but they empirically they had that wisdom. For example, use of high heat was one common step in their processes to produce these materials. Now that we know that these materials had nano properties, they were considered excellent materials at those times, but they did not, I don't know if they knew about the science, but there is no documented evidence of that. So earliest evidence of nanotechnology and its application is, you will get that in India only, that is at Kizadi in Tamil Nadu, and that dates back to 600 BC. Carbon nanotubes, cementite nanowires, all these are found in the pottery that was recovered. And it was also found in the microstructure of wood steel that was manufactured in ancient India from the time period of 900 AD and was exported globally. So that is what we know about India's contribution to nanotechnology. Then from 13th to 18th century, Damascus saber blades. They also have evidence of having carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires. For example, you can see this high resolution transmission electron microscopy image of carbon nanotubes in a genuine Damascus saber blade. So that also is a very good example. Another example that I would like to tell you all is about the Lycurgus cup at the British Museum. If you lit it from the outside, it is green in color. If you lit it from the inside, it is red in color. So it was developed in the 4th century, and it is an example of a dichoric glass, and it makes use of colloidal gold and silver, which allows it to, look opaque green when lit from outside and reddish when lit from inside. So that is that. And then, of course, the beautiful windows of the cathedrals in some cathedrals in Europe, they have got stained glass windows, and those also have beautiful patterns, beautiful colors. That is also possible because of nanoparticles. And one interesting thing is that the glittering effect on the surface of pots, which is also known as luster, and these pots were known as lusterware. So that was, if you see, pottery from the Middle Ages and Renaissance period has a distinct gold or copper colored metallic glitter. That is caused by a metallic film that was applied to the transparent surface of a glazing, and that contained silver and copper nanoparticles. Allegedly, I don't know, they say that this technique originated in the Muslim world, as Muslims were not allowed to use gold in artistic representations, and they sought a way to create a similar effect without using real gold. The solution they found was using luster. So that was from the 9th to 17th centuries, and the stained glass windows, they were there. They've recovered them. They date back to 6th to 15th centuries. And of course, in 1857, Michael Faraday discovered colloidal ruby gold, demonstrating that nanostructured gold under certain lighting conditions produces different colored solutions. And the great work of Victor Lemaire and Robert Denegar for developing the theory and a process for growing monodisperse colloidal materials. It is very important to understand that colloidal chemistry has a lot to this can be said that many principles come from colloidal chemistry of nanotechnology. Basically, these industrial uses of things like specialized papers, paints, thin films, dialysis treatments, they all have origin in colloidal chemistry. One very important discovery that really changed the landscape of miniaturization would be development of dip pen nanolithography in 1999. This was developed by Chad Merkin at Northwestern University, and it leads to manufacturable, reproducible writing of electronic circuits, as well as you can patent biomaterials for cell biology research, nano encryption, and other applications. I'll come to this later on also in one of the annex. I would explain about it later on. So after 1999, in the early 2000, there were a lot of products that were developed using nanotechnology. I'd like you all to please have a look at this video, and this will help you understand. This is just the video of one consumer product using nanotechnology, but it will help you understand how much it can affect your life, right? So let us see. So basically, what is happening is one surface is coated with this ultra dry coating that is nano in like that uses nanomaterials, and just see that is none of the thing, you know, it is absolutely clean. It's not sticking. The muck is not sticking. Work gloves, you put them in water. One has the nano coating and one does not have the nano coating. Now just see the difference, right? So that ways, and you can do the same with mud also. So mud also it is not affecting. You can do that with oil also. It's putting oil on one hand, one glove is absorbing it. Then one is coated with ultra ever dry product and one is not. So just see, just imagine the implications of this. You can have shirts that don't get like they do not that don't get dirty. So products, one side is coated, one side is not coated again. So it'll, you know what this will do, this bucket, so it will avoid waste. You will put paint in it, one side is I mean it is coated with the nano thing, so the paint will come out, the whole of the paint will come out, it won't stick. I mean, you can imagine about these things. This is just, it's showing it with various liquids. So we can skip this. ये hammers in wet concrete. So almost any material can be coated. Simply, it's very easy. You just have to spray. Just see, one sprays the shoes, and then shoes also they don't get dirty. So that is that. See, one is coated, one is not coated. So it's amazing actually. I really found it very interesting. So that was that, and this was the end of the first module, and I'll start with the second module in the next session.